Shoegazing podcast is back. I'm Jesper Ingvaldsson, who run shoegazing.com, one of the world's largest blogs about classic men's shoes. This is actually the first episode that's been recorded after the coronavirus has turned the world upside down. And since one can't travel like normal, and I very much prefer to do these podcast interviews in person, we will likely see some more local Nordic folks represented the coming months. Luckily, we have lots of interesting shoe people up here. And one of them is Kostas Mandilaris, who is from Greece but have lived in Sweden for a few years. A bit over a year ago, he started his web store The Noble Shoe, selling mainly shoes from Carlos Santos, but nowadays also from Paolo Scafora and Crockett and Jones. It has quickly gained traction thanks to Kostas' excellent customer service and successful use of various digital channels. About 700 pairs have been sold since the start. We talked about the benefits and challenges with selling relatively expensive quality shoes only online, about how to work with digital marketing in various ways, and much more. So, there we go. Kostas Mandilaris.
Correct.
Yes, correct. Good.
Correct.
Of The Noble Shoe. Welcome to the Shoegazing podcast.
Thank you, Jesper. It's very nice to be here. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, me too. Just start a bit with the background, because you're quite new to the shoe business.
That's correct.
How did you end up here?
That's correct. I've been in the shoe business for about, I would say, 2 years now, give or take. I originally come from Greece. But I moved here to Stockholm, Sweden about 6 years ago. The intention was to study because I have a background in environmental engineering and water engineering. But the truth was that I didn't want to work in a cubicle and look at Excel files and have this kind of boring job. So I wanted to do something creative. And eventually I ended up finding my first job about 3 years ago. A good job, and I thought, let's buy a nice suit, let's buy some nice shoes, or what I thought was good at the time. And that was my first introduction to suits and shoes. However, I have a rather competitive nature, and I would say I'm a bit of a perfectionist. So I started reading more and more about shoes mostly. And that's how I found actually the Shoegazing blog and the Shoe Snob, which I enjoyed reading very much. And it was a great introduction into quality footwear. So I bought my first pair of Goodyear welted shoes, which was Loke 1880s, was the Aldwych model. I bought it here in Stockholm.
A lot of people have that as first shoes.
Correct.
For me as well, yeah.
It was easiest because it was one of the few that I could actually, entry level, that I could find here and physically try them on. It was great. It was a decent shoe to start with. Then I got my first pair of double monk straps in wine shadow from Carlos Santos, which was my first introduction with the brand. And I love them. I love the shape. I love the patina. And at that stage, I started writing a bit on a blog, Mishu Academy, that I have, that I do as a hobby. And I was writing about suits and some shoe reviews. And I was so thrilled about those pair of monk straps that I wrote a review about it. And then I sent it to Ana Santos, the daughter of Carlos Santos. And she loved it. And eventually she sent me a few review pairs as well. We developed some kind of relationship. But the real change happened when we had the London Super Trunk Show from Shoegazing last year in March, where I went there and I was fascinated by the shoe industry and the art and the feeling that you get when you have something of high quality in your hands. And I was talking to my friend Bojan from Zeb Shoes, and he told me, you know what, you should do something in the shoe industry. And then I mailed Ana Santos, because that was around the time when Skoaktibolaget dropped the brand about 1 to 2 years ago. And I asked her, can I carry your shoes? And she's like, yeah, sure. And that's pretty much how we ended up here.
Yeah. And now with the Noble Shoe, you have an online shop, so to speak. How would you describe the Noble Shoe today?
It's very difficult to describe an online shop in just a few words. You can look at it from the perspective of the owner, but also the perspective of the buyer or the customer. For me, right now, it's what I would call my passion, my goal, my mission is what I do for a living, and I really enjoy it. I put 100 hours a week into it, right? There was a point where I told Reddit about my story a bit, and there was this person that told me that all the roads, all the paths that I've taken in my life, all the decisions have been leading up to this. Like, that this was what I was meant to be doing. And in some ways, I really believe it. And when it comes to the customer side, I would like to describe it as a place where people can come and buy and get quality, but also value of welted footwear, and a bit of a blend between unique but also classic. I really enjoy the more Italian, Spanish and Portuguese style of shoemaking. But I also want them to know that they're coming here and they're going to get some excellence, personalized service, and maybe a sense of, maybe not family, but relationship, friendship. And of course, I can give them some good sizing advice.
Because you now notice apart from Carlos Santos, you have some other brands. Yeah, Crockett and Jones.
A few Crockett and Jones. Paolo Scafora is rather new. I do collaborate as well with Mafte Vienna, and I do also some promotion for my friend at Zeb Shoes. But the three ones I stock is Carlos Santos, Crockett and Jones, and Paolo Scafora.
Yeah,
correct.
And where are your customers mainly from?
It's very interesting because when I began, I didn't expect to have so many customers from the US, but really the bulk of them come from the US. It all made sense later because of VAT, for example, and imports, but initially I was surprised. Most of them come then from the US, and afterwards you have people from Canada, Australia, Hong Kong, Singapore, and lately the Emirates. There's not so much in Europe at the moment, but it's more in Norway, Netherlands, the UK, and sometimes Germany and Switzerland, to name a few.
But it's mainly internationally,
correct.
Obviously. Not many Swedes.
Not so many, actually. No. A few hardcore ones, but not so many. Correct.
And since the Noble Show, it's basically only online. So what's the main challenge when selling relatively expensive shoes only through the internet?
So having an online shop is definitely challenging. In many ways, it's not so different from a brick and mortar because the concept is the same. But especially when it comes to more expensive footwear, you have to, in a way, convince the client or the customer that they can buy online, and you can offer them quite accurate sizing advice, while also making it as less painful as possible if they have to return. They usually hate returning. Now it's more about the actual challenges that comes to do with building and maintaining an online website. You have a problem with a code, all hell breaks loose. It's very difficult, especially if you don't have a background in coding like me. And then you have other things like you need good infrastructure still. Logistics is so important, transport. It was initially my biggest source of stress because I had to use the local post. Then you just move into something more private. You keep improving as time goes by. You learn pretty much. It's very difficult to prepare. And of course, like every other business, you need to be committed. You need to be interested. You don't have to necessarily be passionate, because passion is great, but it sort of dissipates with time. But you really need to be interested and like what you do. Like, you just don't start an online shoe shop just to start an online shoe shop. You actually have to have interest in it and like it. Then a few more challenges is same thing as a brick and mortar. How much stock do I need? How do I plan for the next season? What kind of leathers will go well? What kind of sizes do I need? How much do I stock? And of course, when you have like tricky situations like some customers or some other problems, how to deal with it, not panic. Eventually, it all comes together.
Yeah. You mentioned it with help with sizing online. What can you do there, do you think?
Now, the thing with sizing is it's probably one of the hardest things to do initially, possibly because, I'm wearing a pair of shoes that will feel very different on your foot. Everybody's foot is different, right? But the real challenge is to not only translate from US to UK and EU numbers initially, which I had to learn. We only had the EU back in Greece. But there are also different kinds of people. There are people that have worked with a brand before or have worn, let's say, Carlos Santos before. So they generally know their sizing. So they just buy, or they might have a different question about, what's the sizing difference between the 397 and the 401 last? That's not so big of a problem. Then you have other people that are generally, they have had before welted shoes, let's say Crockett & Jones, Carmina, TLB or something else, and they have some experience with welted footwear, so it's pretty much just guiding them and try to help them find the correct sizing. The most difficult one for me is those that either want to step up their shoe game or they see a shoe that it just looks nice to them, and they give you their sneaker sizing or just the length and width of the foot. It's virtually impossible to give them sizing advice just from that. So you need to try to work with them a bit, and you work with what you have. But you should never just say yes just to sell a pair of shoes. It's okay to say no if you can't offer them good sizing advice. I'd rather not sell a shoe that doesn't fit.
And what would you say are the benefits of selling only online?
Generally, I don't think I would be able to start this because I'm using my own funds and savings. I wouldn't be able to start this if I had to have a brick and mortar, especially with Corona right now hitting the industry a lot.
And we can mention it. I'm at your house at the moment where you live, and shoe boxes everywhere here. So
in the staircase, in the living room, everywhere.
That doesn't show up on your website, so it's one of a brick and mortar would be a different thing, obviously.
Correct. One of the main benefits, though, that having an online business only is your starting cost, as I said, is much smaller. You still need some sizable investment mostly for the shoes, but if you do it like me right now, you start small scale, you don't need, let's say, space to store everything. You might not have employees. Generally, the overhead is much smaller. You don't need to, rent a place in, let's say, Östermalm that will cost you thousands a month. So generally, starting costs much smaller, and in a way, you're a bit more future-proof because many industries are moving towards online. And then you don't see it coming, but then we had the coronavirus and a lot of the retail industries have been hit really hard. I don't think I would probably survive if I had a brick and mortar and this happened otherwise.
Yeah. And if you look into the future, do you want to keep it this way, or do you dream of having a brick and mortar store as well?
I think in many ways everybody dreams of having some sort of physical presence. I entertain myself with the idea that, I would have a shop and someone would walk in and I would take care of them and display my shoes and everything. It's not an immediate priority, but it's definitely something I have considered down the line. Maybe. Well, yeah.
So how important is a good website, would you say?
I think for an online business that sells not only shoes but anything, the website pretty much is your face. Is the first thing everyone sees, and if it's bad or is not working well, then you're in trouble. If your website is loading very slowly, a lot of people will not even bother. Our attention span is so small; they will just bounce out of it.
I'm scared when I read of how quickly people leave websites.
It takes more than 3 seconds.
What's wrong with the world? So, yeah.
It takes more than 3 seconds. Most of them are gone. Yeah. Then you need a good balance between having a mobile friendly, having it very intuitive, having it responsive, simple, functional. It's quite difficult, and you want someone to get into the website, find very quickly what they're looking for, without and having like the least amount of steps towards the checkout. Because the more steps in between, the more likely they are that they're going to drop off, something will happen, or they're going to get bored or forget about it. So simple, concise, but also functional.
How much are you working with developing the website?
I don't have any background in coding or website design. I initially hired a Swedish company to build my website. They bought me a paid theme, but they pretty much did nothing. It was, I would say, a waste of money. But the platform, which my shop is built on, Shopify, is rather intuitive. So it was not really difficult to get started. It took me about 2.5 months. I keep trying to change or improve, make some small quality of life improvements every now and then. But the most difficult part has been dealing with bugs that show up. If you just change one little thing, pretty much everything can break. And it could be so small that you can spend hours, or you can spend like 1 second fixing. I would say I spend a few hours a month just taking a look and making sure everything is correct.
What is it that you spend most of your time with nowadays, running the business?
Instagram and photography.
Yeah.
It used to be very nice in the beginning, but now that I have to prepare, for every day and new photos and new angles and new areas, and then the editing and then the posting and then the captions and the hashtags, it's very time consuming.
Yeah.
It's very time consuming.
And I mean, now when you're working only digitally, how do you market the Noble shoe?
So this is a very interesting question for me, because I also had no background in marketing. Initially, I had my blog, and I still have it. It was, in a sense, a springboard or a way to, put out there in the crowd and the internet that I'm making something. And that's how I pretty much got my first pre-orders before I even had the shoes. So that was my first attempt to market something. Of course, my advice also to people that might want to start something like this is that social media is important. It is a bit of a chore. I would personally focus on one major social media hub that suits your business a bit more, maybe two. But for me, it's Instagram, even though I do have Twitter and I do have my Facebook group and recently YouTube. But focus on one main channel that is probably more suited to your business. And for me, it's Instagram because it's more visual and it works much better, let's say, than Twitter. And then you have, of course, paid advertisement, which is possibly the hardest part as well.
Do you work with only advertising on like Facebook, Instagram, or also Google AdWords and stuff like that?
Initially, I started by myself learning some Google Ads, which it was a bit difficult in the beginning, but once you get the hang of it, it's all right. And you don't really have to spend that much money on it. I tried a bit Facebook and Instagram ads, but my advice is if you're not an expert or if you don't have someone that knows what they're doing, don't even try it by yourself. It's a true money pit and you can lose a lot. Find someone or an agency that knows what they're doing. They will help you much more. But as a channel for footwear, Facebook and Instagram are going to give you bigger returns. And the last part is, of course, organic results on SEO, on Google search. Luckily, the blog has helped me to learn about keywords and how to market my company a bit better. So you rank on search. So that's been a pretty good part as well of the traffic on my website.
What other marketing channels have you used that worked well for you?
I think YouTube, probably. I have found a really nice niche guy on YouTube. He's called Vladimir Risha. And he didn't have many subscribers, like 7,000-8,000 at the time. But I could see from his videos that, you know what? He likes shoes a lot. He has a more dedicated audience. And he's going to make it work. He's going to make something really professional. He cares about it. And he did. It was very unexpected, like, let's say, the returns. But it was great, and I want to work with him again.
I see more of that, like what they call it, small influencer marketing, not going for the big ones, but the more micro influencers.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's difficult to work with big ones because they all pretty much think about money, or they send you a generic message and they're a bit more of jack of all trades. I would say for these kind of industries, focus on something more niche and people that, I like shoes, I like suits, something like this.
Yeah, and I think in general, this industry of menswear or classic men's shoes, it's still rather many potential influencers that, even if you only give them a pair of shoes, you can get some quite nice back from that, while in many other areas you have to pay already for quite small influencers,
correct,
so to speak. So
correct.
We'll probably be more mature in a few years, but still quite cheap, so to speak, for us running businesses.
Correct.
Yeah. But what has not worked well for you when it comes to digital marketing?
It's the paid advertisements in Facebook and Instagram. Until now, like the last 2 months, I tried it before to do it by myself. I did hire a guy for about 15 days, but it didn't really work out. I could see it. I now work with an agency. But the amounts of money that you need to budget, especially for a small startup like mine, which could be up to $10,000 a month. It's a very sizable investment in budgeting, and you need cash flow, and they need to do a lot of A/B testing, and sometimes it might not even work. And it's very difficult to work with someone or find someone that they have worked with shoes or welted footwear before, because you need to target specific interests, specific people, and everybody can say I'm an expert in Facebook or Instagram ads, but very few will tell you that, okay, I work with welted footwear and I know what they are.
Yeah. It's a very small niche.
Correct.
That also needs some expertise within. Yeah. I know that you also are an affiliate on Style Forum, which is one of the bigger menswear forums, for those who don't know. What has that given you?
It's, again, for a small startup, it's quite a sizable investment every month. It's not something, unless you're very well established, that you should expect to give you returns so much in terms of profit or sales. I think Style Forum is more of a platform to create a community and a discussion, and to get some more exposure and direct interaction with customers or other enthusiasts. I've been quite happy with how my thread is generally moving compared to maybe others, but I'm rather active on it as well. On the same time, you have to be willing to put in the effort, because if you just leave it just like that hanging, nothing will happen. You have to find ways to begin a discussion or keep posting, and not be deterred by the fact that someone else might not be posting, or you're not selling well from Style Forum. But community and exposure is really important, for sure.
Yeah. So, which other companies are you inspired by, either regarding how they work digitally with the website or with marketing, or both?
It's a very contrasting area to talk to. Like in Sweden, for example, of course, I'm thrilled about what Scafora is doing, and how much they're spreading around the world over the last few years. It shows that if you have a quality service or product, there's a piece of the pie for you. Then again, back to Style Forum, Tom from Sons of Henry, it's pretty much one of his major platforms, and people know who he is. They call him by his name. And he's working almost exclusively with made-to-orders and custom orders, and he's doing great. For me, he's a major inspiration. I was a blast talking to him in the latest trunk show in Stockholm. And something very interesting to me is it's Paul Parkman and Paul Evans. They're not two brands that I would ever buy. However, when I looked on Instagram or even YouTube, they're everywhere. This means that even, let's say, if they have an inferior product, they're doing something great and their marketing is really good and strong, or they're selling this luxury lifestyle. Like last week I searched for handmade shoes on YouTube, and Paul Parkman had a video, 3.3 million views. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, you've done something right.
Correct.
Yeah.
It works. It obviously works. Yes. So in that sense, for sure, yes, you can draw inspirations even from something you maybe not like or maybe not interested in.
We touched a bit upon it earlier, but I mean, being Swedish-based, when you sell outside the EU, customers can deduct quite high VAT that we have here. And it's especially beneficial for markets like the US, who don't have customs for anything below $800, I think. And I know we've seen many brands stopping this type of sales, either not allowing sales to certain regions for non-local retailers, or having leveled price lists and stuff like that. What's your view on this?
I mean, it's obviously why most of my clientele is in the US. It's exactly because of what you said. There's no VAT. There is free shipping from me. There are no import taxes under $800. It takes only one business day to deliver to New York, 2 to 3 to the rest of the US. It's very quick as well. So for them, it's really rather painless to buy from Europe. While at the same time, it's difficult for us from Europe to buy from the US or any other region because we do pay import and process taxes. Then you have regions like, let's say, Canada, Australia, Singapore has a limit of 400 Singaporean dollars. They do have some import taxes. And other countries like South Africa or Vietnam and Malaysia, they have really high ones, like a luxury tax. So those are not regions that you usually get more, say, complaints about. It's mostly, I would say, the US. Now, of course, I mean, we're playing by the rules, right? It's like you sell outside the EU, you deduct the VAT. That's how it works. Now, the good thing is for us, obviously, and them, is that the Swedish VAT is higher. It's 25%. In the UK, I think in the footwear industry, it's 21%. So the non-VAT price is a little lower for them. And at the same time, it can explain a bit why maybe sales in the EU are a bit less.
Yes.
They have the VAT, it's the same, but someone from the UK can offer a bit more extra insensitive, like free shoe polish or shoe trees. The brands that I retail, it's pretty much have stock. It's Carlos Santos, Crockett & Jones, and Paolo Scafora. Crockett & Jones I don't have that much, but the margins are already not so high, and they already regulate in a way the price. It's quite expensive to buy them as well. So it's not something that I'm too worried about. Carlos Santos is my main seller. They did recently regulate the minimum price with VAT. But they also have, I think they have a quite limited online presence. And when I was in the factory in January, they told me that most of their stock goes to more physical boutiques that more often than not, they don't even have a website. So they don't have an issue with distribution. I think that the biggest issue would be for companies that a retailer would directly compete with them and undercutting them online. And you can see that with Carmina, who have a really good platform now and they do it themselves. And Loke is cutting off retailers, online retailers now for the last year, like Pediwear or even Beckman School Service here, which makes it more difficult for them. They want to focus on their own platform. I don't think, let's say, Carlos Santos would have a problem, but of course it can cause some issues. And you have to have the foresight.
Yeah, exactly. How are you planning ahead? Because even if none of the brands that you carry today have this sort of leveled price list or don't accept sales to some regions, but do you plan ahead if this will become a reality for one or more of them?
Personally, I have this motto that we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But for something so important, of course, I think about it. But eventually, I think that my own brand would be something that I want to do.
Your own private label or something.
Correct. Yeah. And it gives you more flexibility what to do with pricing, with shipping, with development. You break some limitations, I would say. So. Yeah.
So that's 'cause that was one of my final questions here. Where do you see the Noble shoe in 10 years' time?
So I've been open for about a year and 1 month, really. It's been going pretty good, I would say. Pretty good. I'm having some people that I met by sheer luck, and they are investing in the company. So we're going to pretty much, this is the growth stage right now. Of course, I have a plan for about 2, 5, and 10 years. For now, it's just pretty much to gain some exposure and pretty much level the playing field and go on from there, have a specific amount of stock and know what works in the industry. Then you go towards more the 5 to 10 years, which is exponential growth if everything goes well. I think it's more important for me not to just associate myself with, let's say, one brand or 2 brands. It's more about the Noble shoe as a community, or a community, and a place where you can go to get some quality shoes, to get some good sizing advice and some great, excellent service. And also pass on my knowledge and education and educate people about welded footwear and how much better a really good shoe can make you feel. And eventually use this community and this exposure as a springboard to develop my own brand that will already have some kind of audience. But then again, maybe in 5 and 10 years, if depending on the industry, because it's very volatile, to maybe have a brick and mortar. Who knows? In Stockholm, maybe New York. Who knows? This is the dream, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Kostas Mandilaris of the Noble Shoe, thank you very much for being part of the podcast.
Thank you very much, Jesper, and it's my pleasure to be here.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you very much for listening in on this episode. If you enjoy the podcast, please give it a good rating or comment in your podcast player. The Shoegazing podcast will be back with a new episode in a short while, so hear you again soon.